Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing great. Welcome back to my channel. And if you are new here, my name is Nancy. Please subscribe, share, and like my videos. In today's class, I'll be showing you how to cut a off-shoulder pencil gown with double sleeves. So this is the measurements I'll be working with, and I'll be starting with the down part of the dress, which is the skirt. The first step is to fold the fabric into two. To know the wideness of the fabric you'll be folding, you divide the hip circumference by 4 plus 3 inches allowance. So my client wants the circular design to be at the top part of the skirt, while the straight design should be at the bottom of the skirt. So let's get started. The length of this dress is 57.5 inches. So I'll be adding extra 2 inches sewing allowance to the hem, and that will be 59.5 inches. Now the half length of the dress is actually 15 inches, which means that the upper part of the top of the dress is 15 inches. So now I'll be subtracting 15 inches at the top as shown, plus half inch sewing allowance to the waistline. The next line is the hip line, which is 25 inches, and it is gotten by taking the vertical measurements from the shoulder to the prominent part of the hip. The next line is the knee line, which is 34 inches. So this is the waistline, the hip line, the knee line, and the full length. So after marking down the vertical measurements, the next step is to mark the horizontal measurements, which are the circumferences. The waist circumference divided by 4 is 7.625 plus half inch sewing allowance for the dart, and that will be about 8.1 inches plus additional 2 inches for the sewing allowance itself. The hip circumference divided by 4 is 10.5 inches plus 2 inches sewing allowance. The knee circumference is gotten by subtracting 6 inches from the hip circumference, then dividing by 4, and that will be 9 inches plus 2 inches sewing allowance. For the hem of the skirt, what I do is to divide the waist circumference by 4, and then I place it directly on the hemline, plus 2 inches sewing allowance. Now I'll trim out the excess fabric at the side. The next step is to place the front piece of the skirt on the folded fabric to cut out the back piece. Obviously, I left out 2 inches at the side for the zipper allowance. So before trimming out, please take note that you have to create a butt spacing at the zipper allowance. So at the waistline, I'll add just 1 inch. This 1 inch will also make the zipper to rest flat on the back of the waist. Now the next line is the hip line. Here I'll be adding just 2 inches. Then on the knee line, I'll just add 1 inch And this 1 inch I added to the knee line will bring out the butt at the back. Creating this butt spacing with this measurement is very important, but you might not be really cleared with why I'm adding all these inches to this zipper allowance. But I'm sure that when the client wears it, you see the positive result it brings out. So this 1 inch on the knee line, I'll be rolling it straight down to the hem. Now I'll trim out the excess fabric at the side. Now I'll notch the zipper allowance, and I'll also notch the skirt dart, which is the bust span divided by 2 plus ½ inch sewing allowance, and that is 4.5 inches. Alright guys, so this is all for the down part of the dress. Here I have the front piece of the skirt and the 2 separate pieces for the back of the skirt. So let's go ahead to cut out the upper part of the dress. The first step is to fold the fabric into 2. To know the wideness of the fold you'll be working with, you divide the bust circumference by 4, then you add 4 inches allowance to it. This is an off-shoulder dress and I don't want it to expose the bust, so I'll be subtracting just 5 inches for the off-shoulder. Now instead of marking 5 inches, I'll mark 4 inches, so by the time I sew the upper part, it becomes 5 inches. So I'll call this line the chest line. The next line is the bust line. To achieve this, you divide the armhole circumference by 2. The armhole circumference is 16 inches divided by 2, and that is 8 inches. The next line is a nipple point, which is 9.5 inches. The next line is the under bust line, which is 12.5 inches. And the half length of the dress is 15 inches plus 1 inch sewing allowance. Here I was supposed to add ½ inch sewing allowance to the length of the top because I added ½ inch sewing allowance to the upper part of the skirt. But the reason I added 1 inch is because I'll be doing some trimmings on the hem of the half cut, and this will be shown in the sewing tutorial of this dress. Now the next step is to mark the bust span. The bust span divided by 2 is 4 inches plus ½ inch sewing allowance, and that is 4.5 inches. Now I'll mark this on the hem of the half cut, and I'll also mark 4.5 inches on the under bust line and 4.5 inches on the nipple line. Now I'll connect these 3 points together. For the chest line that I'll add 1 inch to the 4.5 inches I marked, and that will be 5.5 inches. Then I'll place my tape on the chest line to mark 5.5 inches. Now I'll connect the nipple point to this point. Now the next step is to mark ½ inch on both sides of the dart on the hem line. But for a plus size person, you can mark 1 inch on both sides. Then on the under bust line, I'll be marking 1 inch on both sides. But for a plus size person, you can mark 1.5 inches on both sides. Now I'll connect these 2 points together. On the nipple points, I'll go down by 1 inch, which I'll then connect to the under bust dart as shown. On that same nipple point, I'll go up by 1 inch. So please take note of that point. Then on the chest line, I'll mark 1 inch on both sides. Now I'll connect these 2 points on the chest line to this point. So this is all for the bust dart. So let's go ahead to place our horizontal measurements. To get the chest line circumference, you subtract 2 inches from the shoulder measurement. The shoulder is 15 inches. So that will be 15 minus 2, and that will be 13 inches. Which means that the chest line for the front is 13 inches and the chest line for the back is also 13 inches. But for a plus size person, it's important to take the chest measurement in front separately and the back measurement separately, because they usually have extra fat at the back, and if you do it the same way I'm doing it now, the wideness at the back won't contain the extra fat at the back, and the client will be unable to zip the upper part of the dress properly. So it's advisable to take this measurement. So the chest line is 13 inches divided by 2, and that is 6.5 inches, plus these 2 inches that spacing, and that will be 8.5 inches, plus 1 inch sewing allowance. On the bust line, we have ½ inch spacing here. So the bust circumference divided by 4 is 9 inches, plus ½ inch that spacing, that is 9.5 inches, plus 2 inches sewing allowance. The waist circumference divided by 4 is 7.625, plus the dart spacing, which is 1 inches, and that will be 8.625. Plus 2 inches sewing allowance. Now for the armhole curve, I'm going to connect the bust allowance at the side to the chest allowance at the side. The next step is to trim this out. So this is all for the front piece of the half cut. So this is for the back piece, and I'm supposed to place the tape starting from this side of the fabric, but because I want this design to be at the down part of the back piece, I placed the tape this way. The first step is to subtract 4 inches for the off shoulder. The next step is to mark the zipper allowance, which is 2 inches at the side. The next vertical line is the armhole line, which is 16 inches divided by 2, 8 inches. The next line is the half length line, which is 15 inches plus 1 inch sewing allowance, and that is 16 inches. Now the next step is to mark the dart, and this is done by dividing the bust span into 2. The bust span divided by 2 is 4 inches plus half inch sewing allowance, that's 4.5 inches. Now I'll mark this on the waistline and on the bust line, then I'll connect the points together as a straight line. On the bust line, I'll mark 1 inch below the line. Then on the waistline, I'll mark half inch on both sides, then I'll connect it to this point at the top. So this is the dart we need for the back piece. So remember, we calculated the chest line to be 13 inches divided by 2, we have 6.5 inches. But for a large size person, like I said, it's always advisable to measure that wideness at the back, because it might be larger than the front. Now I'll add 1 inch sewing allowance to the side. On the bust line, I'll divide the bust circumference by 4, then I'll place it plus 2 inches sewing allowance. On the waistline, I'll divide the waist circumference by 4 plus the 1 inch dart spacing. Plus 2 inches sewing allowance. The next step is to connect the armhole curve. So on the zipper allowance, we need to create a shape at the center back, and this is because the center back of the human body isn't straight. On the waistline, I'll mark 1 inch, just the way I marked 1 inch on the waist of the zipper part of the skirt. Now I'll mark 2 inches on the chest line, then I'll connect it down to the waistline as shown. So the final step for this back piece is to trim out the neckline. So here I'll go in by 1.5 inches, then I'll connect this point to the edge of this other point as shown. Alright guys, we've gotten the back piece and we've also gotten the front piece. Now for the sleeve, we have to do a simple calculation. We have 2 sleeves here. The longer sleeve is a puff sleeve, while the shorter sleeve is a straight sleeve. So the difference between these 2 sleeves is the length and the fact that the longer sleeve has the elastic at the bottom and the shorter sleeve does not have elastic at the bottom. So I'll start by calculating the longer sleeve. The sleeve length for this client is 11 inches, but because it's a puff sleeve, I have to add extra 4 inches to that 11 inches, making it 15 inches. So now, remember that I'll be putting an elastic into the elastic casing at the top and at the bottom. So the elastic casing I'll be using for the top is 2 inches, while the elastic casing I'll be using for the bottom is also 2 inches, which made it 4 inches altogether. So the overall length I'll be working with for the sleeve now is 15 inches plus 4 inches, which is 19 inches, meaning that the length of the sleeve will be 19 inches with the sewing allowance included. The next calculation will be for the wideness of the sleeve, which is the width. So for the width, I will multiply the armhole by 2 inches. The armhole for this client is 16 inches. 16 inches times 2 is 32 inches. So let's add 2 inches sewing allowance to the wideness. That will be 32 inches plus 2, and that is 34 inches. So it means that I'll be working with a width of 34 inches and a length of 19 inches. So the wideness of this fabric here is 34 inches. Now I'll fold the fabric into 2. The length of the sleeve is 19 inches. This is the upper part of the sleeve and this is the lower part of the sleeve. Remember, it's an off-shoulder sleeve. On this first line, I'll be dividing the armhole measurement by 2, then I'll place it, which is 8 inches. But because it has an elastic in it, I'm going to add extra 4 inches to that. So by the time I fix the elastic, it will have some ruffles. So because we added 2 inches at the top for the elastic casing, I'm going to fold these 2 inches in. If I'd made my dress already, I'll place the dress on top of the sleeve to trace out the armhole. But since I've not made the dress, I'm going to take the back piece, then I'll place it on the sleeve to trace out the armhole. Now the next step is to cut the short sleeve. So for the short sleeve, just make sure that you have the same wideness as the longer sleeve. So the difference between the long and the short sleeve will be the length. So the actual sleeve length after puffing is 11 inches. So in this case, I want the puff sleeve to be longer than the straight sleeve by 2 inches. So I have to subtract 2 inches from that 11 inches, which is now 9 inches. So it means that the new short sleeve I'll be making is 9 inches long. Now I'll mark 2 inches for the elastic casing at the top. The actual length for the short sleeve now is 9 inches, so I'll mark 9 inches starting from this line. Plus 1 inch sewing allowance for the fold at the bottom. The final step is to place the shorter sleeve on the longer sleeve to trim out the armhole curve. So this is all for the tutorial. Just make sure you place this on your other fabric to cut out the second sleeve. Alright guys, thanks for watching to the very end. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and if you are new to my channel, please subscribe, share and like my videos. Thanks for your support.